Are you ready for another great adventure out of the Gospel of John and our Just Jesus Stories series? I hope so, because this is quite the one. And it's one that we're also going to have to apply some context to that John does not supply so that you don't really get lost in a few things that Jesus said. You ready? Let's roll with this. Please remember our themes in the book of John. The big obvious one that we talked about first is light versus darkness. And when light enters the world, the darkness sometimes does not acknowledge it, and other times directly withstands it and pushes back as hard as it can. And one of the forms the darkness takes is putting a barrier between us and God to try to make a Jesus and religion. And so these barriers are placed there, and they could be religious barriers. All of the rules and such that religions try to make to say, sure, now you believe in Jesus and you want to follow Jesus, and that's really good, but you got to do it our way, and here's the big book on how to do that. Others, it might be cultural as well as religious differences, such as between the Samaritans and the Jews. And Jesus has been confronting these and removing the barriers, and he's about to do it again. But it's a story which can cause us some angst and even make us wonder about the character of Christ at first. Really, if we pay attention. We're in Luke chapter 4, starting at verse 43. After 2 days, the 2 days that he spent with the Samaritan woman and her friends in the village of Sychar, he left for Galilee. Now, there's a parenthetical statement here in the NIV that is in most versions of the Bible. It'll be separated, or there'll be a little biblical note. This is a scribal note that eventually worked its way into the text. But it's important because the scribe was trying to remind himself and the readers of another incident in Galilee, which is not mentioned by John, but is mentioned by Luke. And it becomes very important very quickly. So why didn't John mention it? Well, John even says that there wasn't enough paper for him to write down all the stories. But another reason he didn't write it down is because the people knew the stories and they knew the context. Later, when the context is in danger of being lost, scribes would sometimes make notations in the margins. And some of those marginal notations, worked their way into the text over the years. By the way, I've seen it again on X recently. People posting all the verses that have been taken out of the King James Version by these modern perversions. Every single one of those verses comes from late manuscripts that were corrupt. Every one of them. And that's why they were removed. They weren't in the early manuscripts. They were added later. The King James only movement is a scam. They don't mean for it to be a scam. They are very honest about it. They keep sending me books to prove it, to prove that their King James Version is the only version, and it just isn't. It was a decent translation and written very beautifully, the beautiful language of the time. But it was a decent translation of some really corrupt transcripts, manuscripts rather. Things have improved, and we will keep getting newer translations as we learn more about ancient languages and as we learn more about our text. Looking around here, one of my faves, I bought it just to read again and again, is David Bentley Hart's new translation, the New Testament. He even just the notes are worth it. It's like $30, so it's expensive. But the notes on the translation make it worthwhile. Translation in itself is amazing. We keep learning. All right. So let's go back. The parenthetical statement. It's a big word. A statement that's marked off by parens or parentheses says, now Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. Where did he do that? He did it in Luke 4. In Luke 4, Jesus goes home to Galilee, and he does some miracles, and he teaches, and he does that amazing opening of reading the scripture from Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 and 2, and then sitting down and saying, that is now fulfilled in your presence, in your eyes today. He's announcing that he is the Messiah, the one who has come to put things right. And a lot of the people really were amazed by him, loved him, spoke well of him. Some said, isn't this Joseph's son? Trying to figure out how he got this kind of knowledge. We talk about this a bit in the sermon series, by the way, that goes from January through February. So you might want to go listen to those as well to really get the context of what's going on here. But in Galilee, there were a whole lot of pushback people that just saying, I don't think so. And so they challenged him on miracles. And he brings up, well, nobody got all the miracles. He even brings up that when Elijah goes into this territory, are there not hundreds of widows? And yet he only healed the son of the widow of Zarephath. Well, they wanted more miracles. They wanted more proof. And whenever they wouldn't accept him, he said a prophet is not accepted in his own country. He's honored everywhere but his hometown. That's where he made the comment. It's in Luke 4. So you might want to take a look at Luke 4 and understand why the copyist here felt a need to remind you of the context, because something's about to happen here. By the way, in Galilee, this got so rough that a mob grabbed him and tried to throw him off a cliff. Yeah, that's in Luke 4. And the scripture says, very obtusely, kind of an esoteric statement, but he just turned and walked through the middle of them. Now, I would really love to have seen that scene, because how do you turn and just walk through a crowd that's trying to throw you off a cliff in your own hometown? He certainly didn't go all punchy-kicky, punching and kicking his way out. Did he all of a sudden glow and they all backed up and he walked through? I'm not sure that seems likely at all. In fact, I don't have a likely explanation for it, but I will tell you my favorite one that I think of, because I've just got the brain that does that kind of stuff. Do you remember the old Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons? And every time one was thrown off of a cliff, it would stand there for a while and then fall. They were hilarious. They were the best. The old cartoons were the best. Yes, I'm an old person. I can say that. I wonder if they threw him off and he just didn't fall and he just looked at them. That would part a crowd and let you walk back through them. But whatever it is, that's what happened when he went home. And so the copyist margin notes gets in there. Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. That seems like honor. If you read Luke 4, you find out a lot did welcome him. A lot really gladly received him, but a whole lot wanted to kill him. So, mixed bag there. They'd seen all he'd done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, for they had also been there. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee. Ding, ding, we know that one. Where he had turned the water into wine. There was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son who was close unto death. Wow. I have grown children, a daughter and a son. And while we had trips to the ER, we never experienced anything like this. And my heart breaks for those of you who have lost a child, or more than one, or who have had to sit beside the hospital bed as they go through cancer treatment, as they cry because of the pain. My heart just breaks for you. While I'll never be able to completely understand how you feel, I do try to empathize. And here's a little secret of empathy, and that is this. Let's say a person like that is in front of me, and I need to empathize with them so I can hear their story and try to help them. I isolate the emotions: helplessness, fear, anger, loss, the fear of loss, all of that. Have I felt any of those? Well, yes, I have, in completely different contexts. But yes, I have felt those. Whenever you're talking to someone and they say something such as, "You'll never understand what this is like," it's all right to say, "You're correct. You're correct. I don't live in your brain and I don't see through your eyes. But tell me what emotions you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking." Now, don't try to interview them too much. Let them tell their story. But in your head, you can separate the emotions out, and I bet you felt almost all of them, if not all of them, at some time. Maybe not to anywhere near their degree, but that allows you to empathize with them. And plus, the skill of listening without judgment is a really good one to help you empathize. But that's not our subject, is it? So here's the man. My heart's already broken for him. His son is near death. And Jesus says something incredibly odd, harsh. He says, unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, you will never believe. That doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? Now, I want to be very clear here. I think Jesus said exactly this. What we're missing is the context of Luke 4, because this is all going on at the same time. They're just telling different parts of the story, and we have to mesh that story together. People have been demanding miracles, scoffing at Jesus, some of them wanting to listen, some of them wanting to kill him. And here comes another man asking for a miracle. He goes, unless you people see miracles, you just refuse to believe. The royal official said, sir, come down before my child dies. This guy's not going to give up. Would you? Don't give up. As to borrow a title from Bob Dylan's song that was part of a big movie, knocking on heaven's door, just keep knocking. Just keep knocking on heaven's door. Jesus replied, you may go. Your son will live. So what happened there? A miracle, an absolute miracle. But it seems so understated. Why? Because the miracles weren't the point. The miracles were to prove who Jesus was. But he didn't come to remove death, sickness, and the like from our land. He came to bring heaven down and to show us we can be part of this plan. But this is still not heaven. This is still a vale of tears, a valley of the shadow of death. So we have to believe in him. And the way to believe in him, one of the ways he got people to believe in him was through miracles. But the miracles weren't the point of the story. So he just says, you can go, your son will live. And I imagine he did that rather sotto voce, that kind of, you can go, your son will live. So that people around didn't start yelling, well, why would you do a miracle for him and not for us? See, that's the thing. Once you start giving somebody something and others want it, you can never stop giving it without them howling that you're taking something away from them. It's human nature. It really is. Every year when the government says, all right, we're going to, we increased the budget last year, your budget by 10%. This year we can only increase it by 7%. All the headlines and all the people on the news programs will be screaming, they're cutting our budget. They're taking away our money. We're going to starve and die. When they're still increasing the money, they're just not increasing it as much. People are like that. Don't be like that. Put a brake on your own behavior. We can't change all of them, but we can put a brake on our own behavior. So the man took Jesus at his word. There you go. That's a skill. That's a skill. Taking Jesus at his word. That's why we're doing all these Just Jesus stories, so that you can hear from Jesus and you can see Jesus and learn to take Jesus at his word, rather than getting it all filtered through church stuff, which really complicates matters. But I will tell you that it's not always easy to take Jesus at his word. But that's a skill we're to work with. Develop that muscle. This man did. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when the son got better, they said to him, the fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour. It'd be about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live, he and all of his household believed. He took him at his word, but they really believed when they saw it come to fruition. And I get that. I really do. I take Jesus at his word, but that doesn't mean that there aren't niggling doubts that hover around like wolves around a campfire until the Calvary finally arrives and the rescue is finally effectuated right in front of my eyes. And I bet some of you feel the same, that you feel like that wonderful phrase I repeat in my prayers, Lord, I believe, help me in my unbelief. This was the second miraculous sign that Jesus performed, having come from Judea to Galilee. But there's more. Here's another barrier that Jesus is going to remove in a very different way, and another very mysterious story that John doesn't give us a whole lot of detail on. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. Some versions will add here, but they are later versions that, manuscripts rather, that are a bit corrupt. They add the mysterious line that they waited for the moving of the waters, and that from time to time an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool after each disturbance would be cured of whatever disease he had. Now that's the story that we all know, right? But you do need to know that that's really not in the best manuscripts. The oldest, most complete, least corrupt manuscripts don't have that story. Is it then a true story? It could be, but we don't have early record of it. And so again, with the book of John, we get this every now and then, where it seems to be a late addition that might be a story that we need to have, but John probably didn't write it. So let's set this up. If you'll notice in your Bibles, most of you using an NIV and NRSV, one of those, that there is no verse 4 in chapter 5. It goes from 3 to 5. And the reason is that section, which is questionable, has been pulled out. I love that, though. I love the story, though. The idea that when the waters are troubled, the first ones in are healed. But there were, to take the other side here, quite a few waters and streams that were said to have had healing qualities. Now, this is not just true in Jerusalem. This is true in almost every society, that there are different streams that are, think of Ponce de Leon and looking for the fountain of youth. And some of these waters have actual minerals and such in them that would help aid healing. But what's going on here? It's hard to know. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, I want you to think about that. There is no social safety net here except for your family and your ability to beg. And beggars show up often in the New Testament because that very reason. Your family would come and set you up for the day for begging and then take you home at night. And this is 38 years. Well, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Well, a couple of things there. First of all, when Jesus learned, one of the great mysteries that we have in the life of Jesus, which we cannot solve, is how much did he know and when did he know it? It seems that as he grew, God allowed him to know more and more about who he was and what was going on in other people's brains, histories, past, and what would happen in the future. But at the very start, you don't want a 4-year-old knowing their God, do you? That would be a really difficult child to raise. Here, Jesus learns. In the book of Mark, he is surprised. He is upset. In other words, he doesn't know all things all the time. What did he know? When did he know it? Seems to be a process, but we have no way to track it. So just remember that. There are a lot of times Jesus went about doing good under difficult circumstances without knowing the end and without knowing all the ins and outs, just like you and I have to do. So Jesus didn't miraculously go through this life with no worries, upset, surprises, or fears. So when Jesus cares, he really cares because he can empathize with us. He has been there with us. So let's go back and look again. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who'd been there, an invalid, for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" That's an excellent question. It seems like a stupid question, but it really isn't. Back when I used to run a therapy practice, the people I did not want to work with were those that were consumed with self-pity, because the self-pity people are the most powerful people in the room. No matter what room they put themselves in, they find a way to focus all the attention upon them, their angst, their fear, their depression, or whatever. And you can bring them into a party thinking this will cheer them up, and they will find a way to get into the center of it and just until people have to acknowledge that. And if you, in my experience, if you help them see this, most of them, you can get them almost out of it. And when they see the loss of the power they've had over people, they go right back and they quit the counseling. Self-pity is a cancer that'll kill you, but it'll also like to infect everybody around you. And it's a horrible thing. I've heard of a phrase once from a man that talked about a person in his family who had enjoyed poor health for 40 years. And I knew exactly what he meant because I'd met the person. And no matter what was going on, they had to steer the discussion to, well, this hurts and I've got this cough and they've always found a way. Now, were they suffering physically? Probably. Here's a secret. A lot of people are. But most people don't make that the central focus of their life. If you'd like to become a hypochondriac, I can teach you how. I really can. It's not hard at all. I don't want you to do this, but I want you to think about this and see what would happen if you do it. And you can give this a try. I have. Wake up one morning and write down every pain and discomfort you feel during the day. Every one of them. My neck was a little stiff when I got up this morning. Write that down. I had a little gassy tummy after breakfast. Write that down. By the end of the day, you're going to have a full sheet, if not more. Now, do that every day and focus on that, and you'll become a hypochondriac. And every single thing that ever touches you is now probably cancer, and you're going to die. The secret for most of us in life is to ignore the little things and to let the, stiff neck, probably slept wrong, and we move on rather than bam, focus. So Mr. Guy laying there, invalid for 38 years, is this your identity? Is this what you want? Do you want something different? That's a fair question. Now, we're about to hear a reply that tells us why somebody felt the need to add that explanatory story before this. "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Now that verse makes zero sense to us unless we have that extra verse that was almost certainly not written by John plugged in as verse 4. Now that's why most modern versions don't throw away verse 4. They just move it down into the notes somewhere so that you can still see it. What's going on here? Once again, John is writing to people that when he says near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, they're all going, "Oh, that one." They know the story. They know about the stirring of the water. They know it's only the first one that gets in that gets healed. And I have no idea why that would be true, but stranger things have happened. Jesus doesn't say, "All right, when the water is troubled, I'll help you get in." Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, walk." Now, the man did. And once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked. Now, that, yay, great miracle. That's not what the story's about. It's even a bigger miracle than you might think, because you might think, well, he couldn't walk, now he could walk. Think about what has to happen for him to be able to walk. Muscles and tendons that have atrophied for all of these years have to grow and stretch, become pliable, so that you're no longer drawn up with unmoved tendons, but rather you can move and you can walk. And you remember how to walk after 38 years, because you would not remember how to walk. So brain connections are being made. This is an amazing miracle. But believe it or not, that's not what the story is about. You're about to get what the story is about. The day upon which this took place was a dun 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 Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who'd been healed, "It is a Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." I guess we need to state again here that when he says the Jews, he's talking about a certain subset of hyper-religious Jews. Not all the Jews, because the man was a Jew, Jesus was a Jew, John was a Jew. So he's not anti-Semitic here. I wish that phrasing were different. I'll be honest with you, I really wish it were. But we're talking here about the hyper-religious group that said, no, it's Sabbath and you can't carry your mat. Well, they made so many rules about the Sabbath that God did not make. He meant it to be a day of rest, not to become a burden to them, where a man couldn't even pick the mat up that he had been laying on for 38 years and take it home to tell his family. That would have been a great Sabbath. But that's what religious people do, isn't it? I'm so glad that God has allowed us to do our Safe Harbor Church, to where we can just strip out all that stuff and look at Jesus. Thank you for being with us and literally feeding us and helping us do it. But here we go. We got to finish this story. So they asked him, "Who is this?" He replied, "The man who made me well told me to pick it up and walk." They didn't say, "How are you walking? This is amazing. This is fantastic." We don't even know if any of these people had ever given him alms, shared any food, money, or water with him for these 38 years. They may have completely ignored him, but as soon as he starts walking on the Sabbath carrying a mat, well, then that's just intolerable here. We're more religious than you. There are a whole lot of people that thunder and scream from pulpits and that challenge you in the streets and that in family gatherings will get in your face, that don't feed the poor, don't take care of orphans, don't visit the prisons, don't. What in the world are we thinking? They asked, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Once again, Jesus didn't heal this man for the show. He just healed this man because this man needed healed. And he did it quietly. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you're well again." And here, listen to this phrase: "Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." What did this guy do? He may have been doing something that put him on that mat for 38 years. That's completely up to us to play around within our brains, because we're not going to get any information out of John. The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Believe it or not, that's going to make some people believe in Jesus, but a whole lot of people elsewhere get angry at him because he violated their rule about the Sabbath. The Sabbath day, you weren't supposed to go more than a Sabbath day's journey, which was less than a mile by some measure. And they would even take an old piece of pottery that was unusable, maybe just even a shard, and break it into smaller parts and put it into a fold of their clothes. And every third of a mile or so, toss one out. That way they were never farther than a third of the mile from their property. They found arcane rules. They applied them inconsistently. Sounds a lot like churches, doesn't it? Let's just get back to Jesus, the one who heals us and says, "Now, Stop sinning or you're going to end up back on that mat or worse. Whatever he did that got him put there, stop that. There's another lesson to be learned as we wrap this up, isn't it? Once Jesus teaches you something, learn it. I know it sounds so simple, doesn't it? Anybody out there struggling with that except, is it just me? Jesus teaches me lessons. And I go, got it, got it, got it. And then I find myself going, I don't got it. There's a video that you can see on YouTube. You can just search for sheep that keeps going into the ditch. And it's only about 20 seconds or so. But I've posted it before and said, this is the story of my life, where you get farmers pulling this sheep that's gone in head first into a ditch. They finally wrestle him out. It runs around in a circle and runs right back in. Isn't it a good thing that Jesus loves us anyway? And that God so loves the world that he gave Jesus to us. We'll end on that happy note and start with discussions about what did you do on the Sabbath? Not you, but Jesus. Next time we meet. Cheers.